Okay, so last time we were here in this room, we did an episode on grief with Lisa Valentine Clark. If you haven't listened, I highly recommend. She was amazing. It was a really cool conversation and really like kind of heavy, but hopeful a little bit. And we are kind of doing a follow-up to that just because of some events in Ben's life. And
yeah. And, my mom passed away about a week and a half ago, and it wasn't totally unexpected, but also, I think it's always kind of a shock. And I've just been having a lot of feelings to process, a lot of things I've been learning, and I just kind of wanted to talk about that today. And I had, right now it's January 31st. And this episode won't come out for a few more weeks. Yeah. And I actually kind of like that we're doing that because when I got back to, I went home right after she passed away, and I was there for almost a week. Then when I got back to Utah, I recorded a video of the feelings I was having. I got a little emotional, and I shared that video on Instagram, and then people started responding right away, and I took it down. I just couldn't handle the feedback on my feelings. And it was all positive, but it was just too much to handle. Yeah. So I'm glad that we can just capture this moment now. And then when the rest of the world hears it, I'll be in a different space and hopefully a little less tender. Right now I'm feeling pretty tender.
Yeah. Well, I want to reiterate that I'm really sorry for your loss. Mm-hmm. Truly.
Yeah. Thank you. You're one of my few friends that actually met my mom, kind of. So
she was so lovely.
She was very far along in her Alzheimer's journey, but she was lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. But she was still bright.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How are you feeling right now?
Just a little nervous because I just want to do her life justice, you know? And I am a crier, but I prefer to cry alone. So the idea of crying here with you actually makes me a little nervous.
Yeah.
But I probably will. We've cried together before.
You're welcome to cry.
So I probably will. Yeah.
Just don't think about how it's going to get published on the internet.
Yeah. But I was wondering if I could just read my mom's eulogy just so people get an idea of who she was.
Yeah, of course.
I wrote this because I'm the writer in the family. It's just a few minutes long, but I think it gives a good snapshot of her life, which was the idea because I wrote it. So I wrote, Virginia Drain Smith was born September 2nd, 1948 to Moncrief Hinton Smith Jr. and Malvin Howard Grimshaw while her dad was guest lecturing at Harvard University. As a child, she was nicknamed Miss, the only girl in the family sandwiched between two brothers, Mason and Parker. Her parents divorced when she was 8 years old, and she and her younger brother Parker spent the next few years living with their mother in a trailer park. These were tough years punctuated by neglect. Ginny had to get herself and Parker ready for the day without adult supervision, and they often went to school hungry. When Ginny was 11 years old, her dad took her and Parker to live with him and his new wife, being tipped off that if he didn't take the kids, Child Protective Services would. Ginny didn't see her mom for the next 10 years. Probably the best thing that ever happened to Ginny was meeting Buzz Schilaty at Western Washington State College in her early 20s. Ginny was quickly welcomed into the Schilaty family and spent nearly every weekend at her future in-laws' house in Lake Stevens, Washington. Buzz's mom, Dorothy, became the mother that Ginny never had. The Schilatys provided the love, stability, and family that she had missed as a child. Now in her early 20s, Ginny felt a pull to reconnect with her mom. She looked Malvin up and found out she was living in Tucson, Arizona. Ginny didn't have enough money to buy a plane ticket to Tucson, so Buzz bought one for her. She boarded the plane wearing her favorite dress, wanting to look her very best for their reintroduction. The reunion went well, and after this, there were irregular visits back and forth between Washington and Arizona. They were never close, but they were family. After dating Buzz for 2 years, she started to get antsy. She asked Buzz one night if he thought they'd ever get married. He responded, "Do you really want to get married?" She replied, "I'd rather be married to you for one day than never be married to you at all." That line did the trick, and they purchased wedding bands that night. The next day, they made an appointment with a Lutheran preacher to schedule a wedding date. The preacher wanted them to take 3 weeks of required marriage classes before they got married. Buzz said, "We're getting married this Sunday. Either you can agree to do it or we'll find someone else." The classes were waived, and he married them that weekend on July 17th, 1971. A year later, when Latter-day Saint missionaries showed up at their door, Ginny and Buzz listened more as a courtesy than out of sincere interest. They weren't looking for a church or seeking for deeper meaning in their lives. In fact, they made fun of the missionaries when they weren't around. Then Ginny started to feel a desire to know if what they were teaching was true. She prayed and asked God and received an unexpected answer through the Holy Ghost that it was all true. This created a very serious problem for her because they had been teasing and mocking the missionaries for weeks. But she knew she had to tell her husband. Right before their next meeting with the missionaries, Buzz approached her nervously and said, "Ginny, I have to tell you that I believe what the missionaries are teaching us." She looked at him with relief in her eyes and said, "Thank goodness, I believe it too." They had both prayed secretly and received the same answer. They were baptized on October 14th, a great day.
It's my birthday.
On October 14th, which I tell you every year, like, my parents were baptized on your birthday. They were baptized on October 14th, 1972, and have been faithful, active, and exemplary members of the church ever since. A year and a half later, they were sealed for time and all eternity in the Manta, Utah temple on April 2nd, 1974. Ginny and Buzz have 4 children, Jessen, WJ, Lindsay, and Ben. Ginny was the kind of mother she didn't have. She was always present in their lives, reading with them, eating with them, and attending any event they were in. Her frequent cheers of "woohoo" could be heard at her kids' many sporting events. She was a thoughtful, fun, and engaging mother. Ginny stepped out of the workforce for a number of years to rear her children. She later returned to full-time work, first as an elementary PE teacher, then 3rd and 4th grade teacher, then school librarian, and finally as principal. She touched the lives of many children and adults. Long after Ginny's Alzheimer's diagnosis, a letter addressed to her arrived from a woman that no one in the family had ever heard of. The author of the letter wrote that when Ginny was an elementary school principal, she had hired her to work at her school. The woman then detailed how this decision to hire her started a journey that led her to a career she absolutely loved. She listed places she had worked, positive impacts she'd had on other schools, wonderful people she'd worked with, serving as a chairperson of a statewide organization, and an important award she'd won. "None of this would have been possible," she said, "without your faith in giving me a chance. I think of that often." She ended the letter, "This clearly was my calling, and I thought you should know that your decision to hire me way back in 2007 was a great one for me, one I won't forget. I wanted you to know, and I wanted to thank you." We will never know the positive impact that Ginny had on so many throughout her career in education. Ginny's care for others was a hallmark of her life. Many years ago, her sister-in-law Marilyn was going through a rough divorce. She put on a happy face at work, even though she was falling apart on the inside. She and Ginny worked at nearby schools, and during her lunch break, Marilyn would go over to Ginny's office just to sit and cry. Marilyn needed a place where she didn't have to pretend she was fine, where she knew she was loved, and where she could just let all her feelings out. Ginny's office was that safe place for her. For multiple days, Marilyn sat and cried and talked, and Ginny just listened. She loved Marilyn just by being present with her. Ginny was blessed with 8 grandchildren. No grades yet. Dylan, Bowen, June, Boyd.
They're great.
They are great.
Grandchildren.
Yes. Dylan, Bowen, June, Boyd, Walter, Brooke, Ryan, and Mia. She loved any time she could spend with them and was always willing to be a free babysitter. Ginny wrote about her grandkids in her journal in 2009. Dylan turned 6 this last week. What an incredible young man he is. His heart is full of kindness. Dylan is a wonderful person. I believe he was chosen to lead our next generation of Schilatys, along with Bowen, Boyd, June, and Brooke. What wonderful children. Love to you all. But the tables turned too quickly. After Ginny's Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2016, her grandchildren began caring for her. They fed her, clothed her, and just spent time with her. She was their friend, a source of comfort, and sometimes accidentally stole their stuff. The child who was neglected by her mother became a grandma surrounded by constant love. Ginny was not defined by her past, but built a life for herself based on love. As the Apostle John wrote, "We love her because she first loved us." As Alzheimer's disease wreaked havoc on her brain, Ginny continued to be patient and kind. She woke up with a smile on her face almost every day, often with a little chuckle like she had just heard the funniest joke in a dream. For the last 6 years, she hasn't known the names of any of her loved ones. She didn't know that she was a wife, mother, and grandmother, and yet there was often a spark of excitement when she saw one of her family members. The family stood around her as she left this life, and just moments after she died, her grandson Dylan said, "Grandma just got her memories back. On the day we lost her, she found us." If Ginny were here today, she'd want to thank you for anything you did to support her and her family. She would thank you for your kindness, friendship, and prayers. She would smile and laugh and be full of joy, and she would want you to know of her deep love for Jesus Christ. She would echo the words of the Book of Mormon prophet Nephi, "Oh, how great the plan of our God! The spirit and the body will be restored again, and all men and women will become immortal living souls. Thanks be to God, who one day will restore Ginny to everyone she loves."
The part that struck me actually was her being just a space to go to for your aunt. Is that right? And I just imagine she was that space for you.
Yeah. People have asked me like, what am I going to miss about my mom? And she always told me I could quit. Like when I was struggling at work, she's like, Ben, you can quit. And she meant it. Like if I just like gave up, she's like, that's okay. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And it was, her love was just so unconditional. Like there wasn't anything I had to do to like earn it or prove it. And I remember when I moved to Tucson when I was 28, I hated it there. And the first week I was there, I was like, what have I done? Why am I here? And I lived away from home almost all my adult life. And so I'd gotten in the habit of calling her every Sunday night. And we usually didn't talk during the week, but sometimes we would. And then when I got to Tucson, I called her every day because I just like needed someone to talk to. And sometimes I called her multiple times a day. And I remember her saying, Ben, you can come home whenever you want. Like if you don't want to stay there, you can come home today and we would be so happy to have you. And she knew I wasn't going to do it, but she like wanted to give me that space. And then she would say, but I know you're going to love it there. I know it's the right choice. And so my mom was just that kind of person who just like, she loved you no matter what you chose. Well, can I just talk about like the events that have happened in the last few weeks?
You can talk about whatever you want to talk
okay.
about right now.
Yeah. And ask me questions, please,
Okay.
So I was home for Christmas and the last like 4 years, my mom was in assisted living for 2 years, and then she's been living with both of my brothers for the last 2 years. She lived with Jessen for 1.5 years and with Jay for the last 6 months. And for the last 4 years, every time I visited my mom, I thought, is this the last time I'm going to see her? Like every time I would leave Washington, I would think, this might be the last time I'm going to see her. So I saw her at Christmas. And when I left, I didn't think that. I didn't think, oh, this might be the last time, because she was just doing so well. Like she was physically healthy. She was happy. I mean, totally oblivious to the world, but just like really like thriving the best someone with Alzheimer's can. And so on Sunday, January 19th, I was at like a little fireside at a friend's house. And while I was driving home, my sister called me and said that there had been an incident during family dinner. My mom had passed out, but everything was fine. Like she was going to the hospital and was going to be just fine. And that was like 7 o'clock maybe. And then an hour later, my oldest brother, Jessen, called and said, hey, we're at the hospital right now. It's not looking good. They don't think she's going to make it through the night. And he said, do you want to say goodbye? Like, I'll put you on speakerphone. You can say goodbye. And I said, that's okay. I've already said enough goodbyes. I don't need to say another one. And in my head right then, I thought it would just be so silly. I would feel so silly saying goodbye over speakerphone to like an unconscious body. And I didn't do it. And when I got the phone, I like immediately regretted that. But like, someone was coming over to visit me already, and like things were happening that night already. Like I'd already had plans. And so like my friend came over. I was like, I'm sorry, you have to go. My mom might die at any minute. And then about an hour after Jessen first called, he called back and said, she died 10 minutes ago. And my whole family had been together for family dinner, like everyone in my family, except for my 2 nephews on a mission and me, of course, here in Utah, but everyone else, the whole family was there. And so they're all in the hospital. They're all with her when she died. And I just think that that's just so beautiful that they all made it to the hospital in time. And so, after I got the call, I like didn't quite know what to do. Like Jess and I talked for like 30 seconds. It's like, what do you say? And so I got off the phone. I just like sat for a second, and then I went upstairs and I told Charlotte, my mom just died. And she was like, I am so sorry. And then we talked for like 30 seconds, and I was like, well, I got to go home. So I went downstairs and bought some plane tickets, and then I just started doing my laundry. Like I didn't know what to do, but just to be busy. Yeah. And I texted some friends, and I probably texted 20 people, just like let them know. And my friend Luke Sorensen, he texted back. He said, do you want me to come over right now? And I said, I don't know what I need. And I really didn't know what I needed. And he said, I'm coming over right now. And I said, okay. And he came over and we sat down, and I was like, I don't know what to say. He's like, you don't have to say anything. We can just sit here. I was like, okay. And we sat there. Then sometimes I would say stuff, and sometimes we would just sit there. And then I don't think I texted you yet. So then I texted you, and then you and Ryan came right over, and we actually had like a good time. Like we were laughing and joking, and I got to like interject sadness every once in a while. And that was exactly what I needed that night. And then you guys left at like 11:45. Like it was getting pretty late, and I hadn't written in my journal yet. So I like wrote down everything that happened. And then as I was saying my prayers, like this thought just like hit me like a ton of bricks that Like for the last like 5 or 6 years, my mom knew nothing about my life, like absolutely nothing. And then suddenly she knew it all. Like now she knew it all. And I was like, and she is so proud of her family. Like she's so proud of us. And I thought of like you and Ryan and Luke. And I texted you guys. I was like, my mom doesn't know who any of you guys are, but she's so grateful you were with me tonight. So that's what happened that night. Yeah.
I know you were preparing for this kind of mentally and emotionally for a long time, basically ever since she got the diagnosis. What was it like? How did it differ from what you expected?
Yeah. It's funny. When she was diagnosed, I was 33. And the doctor like prepared this long report about like his diagnosis and like the tests he had done. And my dad sent us a report. Like, it was like this big, thick report. And I read through it all. And he said that someone at her stage would probably, like their life expectancy was 7 years or less. And I was 33 and I thought she's going to be dead by the time I'm 40. And so I'm turning 41 in a few days. And so when I turned 40, I was like, oh my gosh, she like outlived the life expectancy. And so, you know, you expect it for so long, then at some point, like it just doesn't happen. And then you think, oh, maybe it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And so I felt pretty caught off guard. And I've talked to so many people, read so many books and listened to so many podcasts with people who've lost their parents to dementia. And so often they're like, how can this be? Like they're just like shocked, even though it's so clear it was going to happen. And I just kind of felt numb. It wasn't like I think I was a little shocked, but I just mostly felt numb. Like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, this is such a big thing, but I just don't know what to do right now. And then I flew home the next day, and I remember like getting on the plane. I was like, do I read a book or watch a show or like listen to a podcast? And like I don't want to do any of that. So I just sat there. And it was just so weird. It was like everything just feels so bland. Like that day, everything just felt so bland. So it was, I was surprised that my initial feeling was just like kind of numbness.
How long did that numbness last? What helped?
So one of the weird things was I texted my family that I was coming, but I didn't talk to any of them. Like what do you say on a phone call? Like when your mom dies or when like you're like what do you say to your siblings or your dad? So I was like, well, I'll just talk to them tonight. So I didn't say anything. And so part of my worry was I didn't know what I was coming home to. Like I didn't know how anyone was going to be. And then when I saw them and we talked, it was just like so good to see my family. And we, you know, started sharing stories right away and talking about things. And that was just really nice. And it was so fun to just like hear my nieces talk about their grandma and the way that they took care of her. Because that line I wrote in the eulogy about like her waking up like with a chuckle, like my sister-in-law said that. And but I'd taken care of my mom a number of times, and that really was what happened. She would just like wake up like, yes. That's how she woke up like every day, like say it just like that.
Excited to wake up.
Yeah, she's like, yes.
I need to learn that. I'm always like, oh no, I want to keep sleeping.
And so I think just like being with my family was so wonderful.
It sounds like being like in the physical presence of other people was really important.
Mm-hmm. And people who were like going through the same thing, people who just knew what it was like and I didn't have to explain myself to. Interestingly, like I'd probably told a few dozen people, like that night that she died and then the next morning, and at least 20 people offered to drive me to the airport, like at least 20, like so many people. And which I was so grateful for. But the person I accepted the invitation from was my friend Shelby, and Shelby had been, well, I was her home teacher like 15 years ago randomly. And we're friends. We're not like terribly close. Like I don't see her a lot. But we were in this little study group I started. I call it the dementia study group. And for some of my friends who had parents with Alzheimer's, we read the whole Book of Mormon together and talked about it. And so Shelby was in that group, and her dad passed away last year of dementia as well. And so when she offered to give me a ride, I was like, I want to be with someone that like gets it. Like for that 50 minutes I'm in the car, I don't want to have to like explain to anyone.
Yeah.
I just want to be with someone who like gets what I'm feeling right now. And so that's why I asked her to accepted her invitation to drive me. And that was really, really, really nice. And I was like, thank you for driving me to the airport. And she said, well, I'm just paying you back when you gave me a ride 15 years ago when you were my home teacher. So
That's cute.
it was cute. She's very funny. So yeah, but being with my family was really healing for me.
Why do you want to talk about this here?
Um,
This is like, I mean, it is an open up episode. I'm aware this is definitely opening up, but I'm just, what about this experience? What about, what about your mom made you want to share this right now on this
yeah.
platform?
I feel like there are things I've been noticing and things I've been learning that I just like can't share with the world right now. I'm just like not ready to hear people give their opinions about what I'm saying. But it's stuff I don't want to forget and that I think matters and is important that I think other people already know. And I want people to know, like, you're not alone. Like, this is a tough thing that almost everyone goes through. Like, almost everyone loses a parent. And I want people to know, like, they're not alone. This is what I've been experiencing. And maybe I could say something that could be helpful.
What are some of those lessons?
The biggest thing I learned. So I told you that I didn't say goodbye to my mom on the phone.
Yeah.
I super regretted that. And the weird thing for me was, since I live in Utah and she's in Washington, like, she wasn't an active part of my life. Like, we didn't talk. I only saw her when I went home to visit. And often when I would go home to visit, I wouldn't see her right away. So my life didn't feel different. Like, I mean, it felt different, but there wasn't like any actual evidence that it was different. And so I asked my brother if I could go to his house and like see the room that she had lived in to like see that it was empty. So I could like show my brain like, no, she's actually gone.
Yeah.
So I went over to his house and we sat in her room, like, and my brother and sister-in-law, my dad and some of my nieces and my nephew were there, and we just like chatted and told stories and it felt good, but it's still like my brain didn't quite get it. And then my sister and sisters-in-law like dressed my mom in her temple clothes for her burial. And I decided I wanted to go see her, like see her body. And that was a really, really good experience for me. That wasn't something I would have expected to have wanted to do. And I didn't I was nervous about it. But my mom, for like the last few years, like, she's always in like a jumpsuit, just like really simple clothes that are really easy to clean and get on and off. And then there she was, just like, she looked so peaceful and like so put together. And it was nice to see, like, that's the mom I remember. Like, that's not the woman who's confused and wandering around or, muttering gibberish. Like, the person who looked like so put together and so beautiful. And leaving that, I thought, I'm going to be okay. Like, this is going to be okay. Like, she's gone, but we're going to be okay. And so I was in Washington for 6 days. So I got there on Monday and I left Sunday night, and I was not expecting this. But when I got back to Utah, like, I was feeling really good when I left. Like, I was feeling good. And then when I got back to Utah, I just like was hit with a sudden wave of sadness again. And I was just like trying to figure out, like, where is this coming from? Like, why am I feeling so sad? And as I was writing my journal that night, it just hit me that no one in my life here in Utah knows my mom. Like, I had just been with people who knew her and loved her, like all my, like, of course my family, but like all my friends in Washington, like, they all knew my mom, like, not as Ginny with dementia, but like they knew her. And then suddenly I just felt like I was alone, and that there was no one here who like was going to miss her but me. And that was just like suddenly so isolating. And I thought, well, I can like tell stories and people get to know her through me, but like they won't get to actually know her. And that just felt so sad. I just like started like crying that night, just like thinking, like, not only have I lost something, but my friends have lost something. And let's say at some point I date or marry someone, they're never going to know my mom. And that just seemed so sad. And then the other thing that hit me that I wasn't expecting was when I got home on Monday night, we were all like, I can't believe she died yesterday. Like, it just seems so soon, like so recent. And the next day I was like, I can't believe my mom just died 2 days ago. And then the next day I was like, she's only been gone for 3 days. Like, that's so recent. And then when I got home on Sunday, I was like, she's already been gone a week. And that suddenly felt so long. And then I thought, well, in 2 weeks, it's going to be 2 weeks. And then in a year, it's going to be a year. And in 10 years, it'll be 10 years. And it just felt like she was getting pulled away from me. Like she was already fading. And that just like terrified me that I was going to like lose my mom. And then I thought, I'm 40 now, and if I live to be, 81, I'll have spent half my life without my mom. And I just thought that is just so sad that I'll live half my life without this person who has just mattered so much to me. You just can't replace that. And those were things I hadn't expected. Like the need to say goodbye to her, the isolation of being around people who don't know her. And then also like how scary it was to feel like she was already slipping away.
Yeah.
I just wasn't expecting any of that. Yeah. And here I have I've read books about grief and loss, I've talked to people, and like I wrote a book about my mom, dying with dementia that hasn't been published, but I wrote it. Like I felt like I'd processed it all, but you
and
just
it has
can't.
a ton of research in it. It's
and just it's just something you have to you don't know until you've experienced it.
Yeah. It was a little strange because we had that conversation on grief, and then your mom passed, and then it came out like the next Tuesday. It was just interesting timing.
Yeah. And
was that weird at all?
It was weird. It was super weird. And I listened to the episode before it came out, like the cut of it before it got released. Just while I was out on a walk in Washington by myself, and I'm just walking down the street, crying my eyes out. I listened to Lisa Valentine Clark share all of her wisdom. But it was good. It was good to hear that. It was good to hear. It was good to hear the things I needed to hear from my own podcast.
Yeah.
So weird. But yeah, it was really good. Just one of the things I felt lately, it's interesting. People ask me how I'm doing all the time, and the word I've been saying is tender. It just kind of feels like my emotions just right at the surface. Like at any moment I could just cry. And a lot of times I don't, because I am teaching a class, or I'm on the bus, or I'm eating dinner, but I could just cry at any moment, because my emotions are just right there.
Yeah. And
being here back in Utah with people who don't get what it's like, I just have I've been reminded that Jesus gets it, he's experienced this for me and with me. And I can rely on him and his grace and his comfort, but also I got my family, and I've got people that are so happy to hear from me and talk with me. So many people said, if you ever want to talk, let me know. I've gotten hundreds of offers of that, and sometimes I take people up on that. Sometimes I do want to talk, and I really appreciate that. The people who would just be there when I need them. Yeah. And it's interesting because I, at the same time, want to talk about this experience on my own terms, but I also want people to bring it up. But I so selfishly want them to bring it up just when I need it.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So,
right.
And at one point I was I want to talk about this. Someone bring it up. But I'm well, they don't know until I bring it up. And other times people are hey, how you doing? I'm I don't want to talk.
Should we think of a code word? Where if you want to talk about it, you send an emoji to someone. And then they call you and be hey, just bringing this up.
We could think of a code word. Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah. Or I could just, be a person who can express my needs.
Well, it's hard. And yeah. No judgment at yourself right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Everything you're feeling is valid. I'm sorry that you felt regret over not saying goodbye on the phone.
I think I might have even told you that night. Because I immediately regretted it. And I even thought should I call back? And I was I don't know. That's so weird. And then it was suddenly too late.
How is that sitting with you now?
I don't think it's bothering me, because in that moment I was acting on the best information I had.
Yeah.
This feels silly to me. I wasn't able to fully process what I was thinking and experiencing. Once I got off the phone, sat for a minute, I was oh, I should have said goodbye. Yeah. And like I said, I've read a ton about grief, and I read about the importance of saying goodbye. And even if the person has died, you let your family come and say goodbye to the body. And I was my thought was I know better.
Yeah. But I mean, you can intellectualize anything, but learning any information doesn't teach your nervous system how to handle it when it shows up.
Yeah.
And if you're that is a jarring thing, if you have this shocking experience, and it sounds this is the only time in your life or in the past couple years that you weren't expecting your mom to die.
Yeah.
And there's been false alarms before,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I just have a lot of compassion
Yeah.
for that, because of course you're going to be in shock a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that came at that moment.
Yeah. And thank you for that. And, I'm not like mad at myself. It was just like, oh, Ben,
Yeah. Can I share a story?
Yeah, please.
Well, it just reminds me, when I was in college, one summer I just decided to drop everything and go visit my grandmother in Canada. And it was like a 17-hour drive that I took on my own, and I just stayed with her for a week. And she fed me so much toast. Like, I was like a growing boy, and she made me a loaf of toast in addition to like breakfast. And I was like, oh my gosh. So every morning I would eat an entire loaf of bread that was toasted with jam. And
That's
I was
a lot
like,
of toast.
you have to roll me out of here. Anyway, I love her. I miss her. But back at school a couple months later, I had this feeling. I was like, I need to call grandma. I really need to call her.
Mm-hmm.
And I forgot for a couple days. And I also needed to call the Ford dealership. I don't remember why, because I had a Dodge, but whatever, something with my car.
Very important details.
So I set an alarm that said, call grandma and Ford.
Uh-huh.
And I set it to like 3 minutes after my first class was going to be out while I was walking. And the alarm went off, and I was like, oh, it's kind of not a good time. Like, I was running late. I need to go do something, and I was really hungry. And so I was just like, I'll call her back.
You needed toast.
I needed some toast. And didn't think anything of it. She was really healthy. And then she fell that night and didn't wake up the next morning.
Mm.
And I felt awful. It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling to be like, I knew I should have done this. I knew I wanted to do this. And I even had like this prompting that this was important. And like, I would have been like one of the last people to talk to her, and I wanted to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I can say I get it. That's very different, but just like that unsettling feeling it's super unsettling. Yeah. I was like, gosh, you idiot.
It's like when someone dies, you like can't get that moment back.
Right.
It's like, it's over.
Well, and it shows just like the fragility of life. It's very like scary and ominous, but also just really sad.
Yeah.
And I would like how much I would love to eat a loaf of toast right now at my grandma's house.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As like painful as it was. I would love that. But yeah, I held on to that for too long. Mm-hmm. And I hope you don't hold on to yours.
Yeah,
you're forgiven.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like seeing her body, and I got to say goodbye there, and
that's good.
I mean, she was just as present there as she was in the hospital, basically. So
yeah.
So I got to have the moment that I missed.
I know my grandmother is up there being like, see, you should have listened to the spirit. She just chastised. She's listening right now, and she's like, that's the last time. She probably did teach me a lesson. It's probably planted.
Oh, goodness.
One thing that was interesting to me was how like happy you were and sad.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like when we came over that night, we like laughed and joked, and it was like a good old time, but then also it would like dip into really serious and really sad. Yeah. And luckily all four of us know each other pretty well, and I think everyone was able to be okay with that, Mm-hmm. But you were like happy and doing well.
Yeah.
And what is that like to have a tragedy happen and then be happy?
Well, the tragedy had been happening for so long.
Yeah.
Like, she had been dying for so long, and like she hasn't known who I was for 5 years. And
it's been an important 5 years for you too.
It really has.
Like, you've made big changes and done important things.
Yeah. Like, she has no idea that I wrote a book. Well, had no idea,
Yeah.
Like, she just didn't know anything. And so it felt like there were all these little cuts along the way, like little cuts of grief, like not like a big moment, but like these cuts. And this last one just like felt like a punch, like the last punch. And it was kind of like all the grief of the years was kind of like went through me and is like lingering with me. But mostly I'm just like, cause I'm like so glad that she doesn't have Alzheimer's anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm so glad. And I'm also just like so sad for me. There's that line I share in the eulogy, on the day we lost her, she found us. And that just like came to me that night while I was praying. And so I'm just like so happy for her, but also just like so bummed for us. And, you know, my friends, the Wrights, who I have dinner with every Sunday, they picked me up and drove me home from the airport. And as we were driving home, Sammy said, "Your mom's probably reading your book right now." And she doesn't need to read because I've read it to her twice, you know, while I was visiting, but she didn't know what it was or what was happening. But just like, she's so much better off. And I'm so glad that she lived as long as she did, because her presence was so good for my nieces and nephews. Like, it was just she was so good to them, and she really like gave them the best she had. And like a couple years ago, I've prayed thousands of times for her to die, because I was like, this would be better. Like, God, just take her home. And then a few years ago, there was this scripture in the Doctrine and Covenants, like, don't pray for the things you ought not to, like, trust God. And I was like, okay, I should probably stop praying for this.
Okay,
like she's not dying anyway. And so I just started praying instead that she would fulfill the measure of her creation. I was like, God, like, let her fulfill the measure of her creation. Like, whatever it is she needs to do on earth, like, let her do that thing. And I think my family really needed her. And I'm just like, so there's like this feeling of like sadness and loss, but also like extreme gratitude and also like relief.
Yeah.
And like there was so much stress with her being so sick for so long, and like that stress now is gone, and now we're just sad, but the stress is gone.
Do you think she knew that
we were stressed?
No. That your family would need her in that role?
I don't know. But I know that if she had known, she would have chosen to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what she knew. But I know that if God had said, "Ginny, we need you to have Alzheimer's for 8 years, and you're not going to know anything, but it's going to bless your family," she'd be like, "Sign me up." I don't know if that's how it works, but she would have done that.
She's special.
She would have done anything for us.
When we were with Lisa, she was talking about how one thing she learned is that grief is not a bad thing, and by running from it, it wasn't good, and that she's learning to have it be her friend and kind of welcome it. And just so you know, like, I'm not saying that you can do whatever you want, you can feel whatever you want, but I'm just curious if even in these short few weeks, if you felt that at all, like wanting to run away from grief versus having the experience of welcoming it.
Yeah, honestly, no, I haven't felt the need to run away from it. And part of it is, you know, reading all these books on grief and loss. You know, that conversation we had with Lisa have been really helpful. And
she's like the angel on your shoulder,
yeah.
The Lisa on your shoulder.
But there are moments like I'll be at work and I'll be like walking down the hall. I'm like, I can't cry right now. I'm just like walking down the hall. Like, I'll wait till I get back to my office, you know? And I just know, like, every night when I get home and write my journal, I'm going to cry.
How do you let yourself invite the grief in?
Yeah. I don't know if it's something I just like feel it bubbling up, and I just like
don't stop it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, I cry in the shower, I cry driving. Like, it just happens at the most random moments. And like someone who I don't know sent me a message, and she was like, "Ben, I never met your mom, but I got to know her through your book, and she helped me be a better mom." And here I am, like, the stranger writes me, and I'm just like suddenly sobbing, looking at my phone. Yeah. You know, it's just, and so yeah, I don't feel like I've been pushing it away.
How do you want to honor her? I know at the beginning of the episode you're like, I hope I just do her justice.
Yeah. I just really wish the whole world could know her, because she was so lovely. But what she would really want is for people to like just be kind to each other, and also to just like be like Jesus. That's what she would want. And she would just like, she's the kind of person who would just do anything for somebody. And I just like want to like, hopefully people would just like see that in her. And one of the nice things about all this, you know, we've been looking for like pictures of my mom to like have on the program at the funeral. And so we've been going through old pictures, and it's like funny, like these old pictures, I'm like, oh, that's the mom I remember. Yeah. Like this like happy, gregarious, like put together person. Because I feel like for so long she's been someone who was so different. And it's like nice to like remember like who she was. And my sister had these old voicemails that my mom had left that she'd kept for over the years. And so she just like played us some of them. It was like so fun to like hear my mom's voice. I was like, oh yeah, that's what she sounded like before she got super sick.
She went through a lot in her life as well. I mean, I know a little more, but the eulogy talked about some like incredible challenges and trauma in her childhood. And she sounds like a huge cycle breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Like I call them Matildas. When like a Matilda gets out of, just overcomes a really devastating family situation.
Yeah. The term is transitional figure.
Matilda. This will be cut right now, this pause, but like, how did she do it?
Like I said, there's this term transitional figure for people who don't pass on the
generational trauma.
Yeah, the dysfunction of their family to the next generation. And when I was working on this book that hasn't been published, I called my uncle Parker, my mom's younger brother, to like talk to him about their childhood. And he just said, when we were kids, your mom and I decided we weren't going to be anything like our parents.
Yeah.
And she just didn't want to be that. And
well, it sounds like she wasn't bitter about it either. Like she had to work harder than other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like she wasn't resentful of that.
I never ever picked up on that. And her mom, who was neglectful, she's like, she's always my mom. And so I'm going to reconnect with her. My mom just did not hold grudges. Mm-hmm. She did not talk poorly of people. She just like saw good in people.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think it is pretty amazing how many people get to know her through you.
Yeah, and I hope that is, part of the way I can honor her, just like sharing her memory with people.
Yeah. Well, and the parts of you that were molded by her,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And like the ways that she shielded you from that generational trauma that allowed you and your siblings to grow into incredible, functioning, serving people.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like anyone who gets to know either of you, any of you, like how could you not see a piece of her?
Yeah, thank you. And one of the things that has made me feel like so grateful is that like none of us didn't help out. Like everyone stepped up to the plate. Like we all helped her together, like in the ways that we could. And I just like, I remember like the day after, I was like, none of us have any regrets.
That's nice.
And I mean, of course, besides the I didn't say goodbye.
No. I released you from that regret.
But just like we really did our best, you
That's
know,
good.
And no one was absent, and just like my family is super cool.
How's your dad?
He's doing well. I mean, it's tough. There in one of the books on grief I read, they call Alzheimer's the long goodbye, and this book said that loss at any moment is really tough, but a long goodbye is one of the gentler ones.
Mm.
And I don't feel like I've been like as immobilized as some people I know who've like lost their parents suddenly. But it's been really tough. And I think my dad is just like, there's been this sadness for a long time, and it's now just a little fresher.
Yeah.
But we've been losing her for a while.
Yeah. Well, we love Buzz.
He is so wonderful. And I just one more thing I want to share is just how people have been helpful during this time. So I got so many messages after she passed away from people who knew me personally and just people who don't, who just like follow me and were like, I'm so sorry. Everyone should like reach out if they like want to express something, but like the message from people I didn't know, it didn't super like affect me. I was grateful, but like we don't have a connection. But the people who like actually knew me and knew my mom, like those messages just like meant the world to me, and like people sharing memories. My friends Diana and Jeremy who live in Tucson, the day after she died, they like got a candle and like wrote her name on. There's like this little like altar in Tucson where you can like remember a loved one, and they like took a video of them like putting in her candle in there.
Nice.
And I was just like watch this video on my phone, just like sobbing. I'm like, that is so sweet, because they like both had met her.
Yeah.
And like that kind of stuff was just so wonderful and so kind. And a lot of people have like reached out and like, Ben, how are you doing? And I know there's like so much kindness in that question, and I appreciate it. And one friend asked me, what does grief look like for you today? And that was such a good question, because if someone's like, "How are you doing?" What do we say?
Like bad.
Like
numb.
or like I'm fine, or I'm good. Like that's just such a big question.
Yeah.
And like I'm both good and bad. Like
Was this friend a therapist? Because it sounds like it.
definitely.
Really?
Yeah. But what that question allowed me to do is just like focused my thoughts on what does the grief look like today, and I can talk about that. Instead of being like, oh, well, I'm coping, I'm like, well, I'm sad about this, or I'm actually doing pretty good, and that's been really nice. And some people have been like, hey, how can I help? Like, just ask me what does the grief look like today? That's all I need.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm. And so people have been just really helpful and so kind. And I just feel really loved and really supported.
That is really beautiful. And I think also applicable to a lot of different scenarios, like beyond grief. Like, what does this look like for you today? I'm glad you shared that nugget. Is there anything else you want to share? Yeah,
just the last thing I want to do is just like thank anyone who's been there and helped us, whether it be like physically there with me or my family, or just, reading about her, or just like hearing my stories, or just like sending thoughts and prayers, or any of that, just like anything, just like think about us, just like thank you for the love. I remember when I got home, I gave my dad a hug and I said, this is from 30 people. I told me to give you a hug. And then after I waited 2 days to post that she had died, and I was sitting with my dad and I said, thoughts and prayers actually work. We're getting a lot of them right now. And I just feel so lucky to have so many people just be so kind and helpful. So just thank you.
Yeah. How do you feel now after sharing all of this?
I feel just a little raw, but mostly good. I know I'll feel differently in a few weeks when this episode comes out. But I just feel good that like this moment of my experience has been recorded,
captured. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Thanks for opening up. Can I tell one story that I have about Ginny?
Of course you can.
I'm going to select. I was there for kind of one of the close calls, and that was my experience meeting her.
It was scary. Like, we got there and she like passed out, and then we thought she had died, and then paramedics came and she didn't die.
Yeah, it was scary.
I was like, I actually remember thinking, I can't believe my mom just died in front of my friend.
Yeah.
It was...
I was definitely thinking the same thing.
Yeah. like how awkward that I bring Charlie to be my mom and then she dies.
Well, here's the deal. This is what I'm going to say. You remember what you had me do after? Like, there was like a ton of tension, and you were like, Charlie, will you do a cheer? And I was like,
yeah.
And then I did. And I was like, and now I'm like, I'm so glad I did that. Even though it was really uncomfortable and awkward, I'm like, I'm so glad I could cheer for Ginny Schilaty, because I do cheer for her, and I'm cheering for her right now. And I want you to know that there's a lot of people who knew her personally, or who just know her through you, that cheer for her and cheer for you and your family, and have felt her cheer for them.
Yeah. Thank you. That really means a lot to me. Seriously.
It's true. Me and Jenny are just cheerleaders.
Cheerleaders all around.
She's so popular. She has to be a cheerleader.
Indeed.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart. And I love you.
Thank you, Charlie. I love you too.
Let's think of that emoji. And then you send me the emoji, and then I'll say, what does grief look like for you today?
Perfect. We'll have the whole script.
Call me, and we'll talk for 8 minutes.
Amazing.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Yeah, we hope you loved it, and we hope you love Ben. You better.